This is Snøhetta, the mountain. It's 2,286 meters tall. I know that you have a taller mountain in Slovenia, I checked it out, but it's not the tallest mountain in Norway, but it's one of the tallest. And why on earth is an architect studio named after a mountain? It's actually a very stupid story. And it began, for the first office we had downtown in Oslo, it was on a loft, on the upper floor of a building. And at the first floor, there's a very, very, very brown bar called the Hall of Dovre, Dovrehallen. And Dovre is a mountain area in Norway, which on top of Dovre sits Snøhetta. So on the top of the building, on top of the brown bar, was the office. That's why we're named after a landscape and also after a brown bar. I named the lecture Landscape Plus Architecture, since I was asked to really talk about this transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary work that we do in Snøhetta and how actually relates our projects back to the landscape. And since Snøhetta really began with landscape architects and architects from day one, that's been the base all the time. And the project, I'm going to show you tons of projects and a lot of pictures, and maybe tell you different stories that you usually will hear about the architecture. So first, okay, we have our main office in Oslo, 100 people, and 50 people in New York. We have 10 people in San Francisco and also 10 people in Innsbruck, 2 people in Stockholm, half a person in Singapore, and 1 person in Adelaide. And we have projects all around the world. And of course, these dots just show some of the projects, and if I should include every competition we have done, I'm sure there will be dots all over. But of course, we would like to have a dot in Slovenia and in Ljubljana. That would have been fantastic. Our main offices, you see the Oslo office to the left, and then that's really downtown Oslo, and to the right it's the New York office, it's 80 Pine Street, and as you can see, thanks heaven for Google Earth, you say it's actually the same scale in Google Earth, so now we try to find these landscape shapes all around the world to have new offices. The Oslo office is actually in a shed that's owned by the Port Authority. And it's 1,600 square meters on one big floor, and we're all sitting there together. And it really reflects back the way we work, because also even the administrative people, they sit in between. So the only place actually you can be alone is at a handicap toilet, because we have unisex toilets as well. So this is a day at work made by a colleague, Rob. And this is then the yellow team, the blue team, and the green team, and I mean all these different teams working together, and we have to move around. It's really about mobility. What of course is lacking here is that the coffee machine is not there, because we know that everybody will stand around the coffee machine and discuss. And once a year we try to actually climb the mountain, the holy Snøhetta mountain, and then people come from all over the world from the offices to actually do this hike together. You see Snøhetta in the back. And I also took this picture that is from one of the tours, and then people then have never been hiking and never seen snow before. They actually are afraid they're going to die when they do the hike. Because it's a pretty tough hike in 5 hours, and it's always snow on the top, because Snøhetta means snow hood. But then sometimes the weather is really, really bad. You can't see the next stick. It's snowing and it's misty and you can't even see the top, and you're really afraid that you are lost. And other times it's really sunny and it's really easy, and I think that also describes the way we work in architecture. Sometimes the client pays us, we win a competition and we can proceed, and other times it's really bad. We have to lay off people and it's really tough. But I think it's important to keep on climbing mountains. The way we would then work, it's also what we call transpositioning, and that was actually starting that there were quite a few researchers come into the office and try to figure out, how do you do this? What is the Snøhetta method? And I really mean, we're just boys and girls, and we're working together and we want to share ideas. The researchers made this book about ID works. What was really interesting about that was that we were the only so-called creative profession. There was a bank, and there was Statoil, the big oil company in Norway, and there was a magazine, and there was also a set of lawyers, and they were looking into how these different professions worked with ideas. And actually what they figure out, that we work actually pretty had common ways of doing it. And they said that they added up in 10 different drivers. What is a driver to make a project? What is a driver to make an idea? This is actually in Norwegian, so we get a very short Norwegian lecture as well. Gjøre det fysisk, get physical, that's kind of easy to understand. Model making, really important for us. And prototyping is extremely important, to test something out and test it again and over and over. And then the third one is my favorite, it's liberating laughter. It's really important to have fun, and it's actually liberating energy, and you start to actually have new ideas, and you're maybe not specifically talking about the project that you're doing, but you can move on. And I think it's really important for actually have the resistance of actually be creative, which is the next one. So we invite our clients, the users, to have a 4-hour workshop where we actually try to then say we are transdisciplinary. So the client will become an artist, and the artist will be the acoustician, and the acoustician will be a landscape architect, because then you start to ask totally different questions, and there is no that resistance. So there's no bad ideas, and everything is on the table, and it's all about sharing ideas. And then we also make them go physical to make a model of the concept. So in 4 hours, actually the client also need to act as an architect. And I think that's a very good starting point for a project where you actually want that the client should get the idea, at least he thinks so, because then also the guy with the money wants to pay more and wants to keep on doing the project. So it's really all about being generous. I think that's so important, being generous to the co-workers, being generous to other disciplines, be generous and give away your ideas, because then they will all evolve into something much more. It's all really started because Snøhetta started to work international from day one. And it was about the competition in Alexandria in 1989. It was a UNESCO competition. I think it was 524 entries. And of course, everybody else says that why are architects so stupid that they work for free? Because it's an anonymous competition and nobody is paid. It's just for the three extra places. And when we then got the telephone call from Egypt, was a very bad telephone call in 1989, and they said, you won the third prize. It was like, you won what? The third or the first? And it was actually the first prize, so it was amazing. It took 12 years to build a project, and it was really initiated by the concept, and we are really working a lot with the concepts, and we think that is a driver for all the work we do. So the concept here is really that we work with a circle, and the circle is also the son of Osiris, the goddess, in the ancient religion in Egypt. And how do you then use the circle? You actually go to the landscape, you go to the horizon. And as we know, you can always look at the horizon, you will never get bored of it, and it's always in your eye height. If you're tall or short, doesn't matter. So if you then have a circle, and you place it on one line on the horizon, and then you actually flip it. So you said there where it actually touched the line, it's actually present. And then you take away the past is below the sea level, and the present is where you go in, and the future is actually adding up. So, of course, this was a lot about the history of the library in Alexandria, which did exist thousands of years ago, and now we're going to make a new history. So you can see that the future goes much longer than actually the past of the history. And what was really important with this library is next to the university in Alexandria, and the client said, yes, it's a plaza, but of course it's gated, it's fenced. And we said, no, there's no way. A library is really important that people can visit it. And they said a lot of people in Egypt, they were really against the project because there's so many people that can read or write. Why do they need a library? So we said that if more people go into it, maybe more people actually also will get interested in it. So we managed to actually make it a public plaza that is open 24/7. And we worked with this big circle as it's actually very low-tech. We wanted to use the stone from Egypt, because of course we knew that there had been carving in stone for thousands of years in Egypt. So we worked together with artist Jorunn Sandnes, and she was also part of the competition. And so we had this big reading room in 7th floor indoors, and then we have the wrapping of all the letters of all the different languages in the world. But what we discovered that they had totally forgotten how to carve in stone in Egypt. That was like 2,000 years ago. So now we actually had to get the people to Norway because we have very good granite industry, and to teach them to carve in stone again. And what was really good with the project was that it was a very international contracted, but all the international contractors needed to team up with a local Egyptian company. So actually they got a new industry to learn how to carve in stone, and actually they have made a new way of living to start to do that. So what does actually a library do over the years? How does it actually react to the city? You see here the skyline. It's more like a landscraper than a skyscraper. And of course, at the beginning of the Arabic Spring, it was extremely touching. We got updated every day and sometimes every week. And then they sent us photos that actually the students were standing hand in hand and were actually fencing the library because they were afraid that it should be ruined. And then we really understand that actually it has a very thorough ownership in the place it actually exists. And the feeling of that you can move the world with architecture and it belongs where it is. And I mean, it's a long time we were gone and it's really working well. The other large project, I mean, from 1989 to 2001 was the opening of the library in Alexandria. So in 2000 there was this big another anonymous competition, international. I mean, nobody paid, but everybody can deliver for the new opera and ballet in Oslo. And at that time, it was a year before we had opened the library. We didn't really have any work. We had to lay off people, and it was really tough. And we said that we really want to be part of the competition. And we entered. We did it in 6 weeks, actually the same time as we did with the library. We did the competition in 6 weeks. And we were absolutely not sure at all that we had a winning scheme, but they actually chose us. And it felt like, okay, no, it's not just pure luck the first time. No, we had another large project. So here you can see it's sited downtown Oslo, close to the central station. Here is where we have our office. And the whole area is just really needs to be transformed. The Norwegian government and the politicians had discussed for 20 years where the opera should be. Actually, we have never had a real opera in Norway. The one we had was just a theater, and a lot of Norwegians said, why spend so much money on opera that nobody really likes? And it's so outdated, and it's really terrible because, I mean, we have been so lucky, so much oil money and gas money, and spend money on culture, not interested. So a lot of people were really against to build opera. But when the politician then at the end said that yes, we know the site, then it was also about this is a transformation area. So they actually picked the cultural project first, and it will set a standard for all the other buildings and projects. So this is the scheme. It's actually sloping into the water, and we wanted it to be lower than any of the buildings around. The green hill, the green structure around Oslo, it's very easy to get to, and the hill was really important for us. So we said that only the stage tower can be on top of it. The whole thing should be really low. And we then discussed when we were designing it in the competition. We knew that people were really against it, so we said, okay, if you don't want to go into the opera, you should be able to go on top of the opera. So we turned the fifth facade, the roof, into a public plaza, which they really didn't ask for. So there's a curved wall that actually accesses straight into the water, and then you have the magical world of the theater, and you have a factory, all the people that are working there in the back, and then you have one carpet covering the whole thing, which is the public plaza, which is open 24/7. Any students here that can see it, you don't really need to be good in 3D to win a competition. So it's good if you have a good idea and you can explain it, it actually works. This is actually from the competition. And then also how that is reacting back to the people should be easy just to slide into it. And the construction side was really complicated because it's inside the water and you can see the heavy traffic. And then, of course, we wanted this new opera to be a white building. We had this feeling that it would be something extra. We don't have that many white buildings. We have a lot of snow in Norway, but we don't have that many white buildings. And we had actually this notion that we wanted to go to the real opera marble, the Carrara marble. And it's like a landscape. It's really this covering the whole thing. And since there were no draft or nothing said about the public plaza, there was also no program. And that was actually really good, because there are so many public spaces that over-programmed. You should sit here, you should watch there, you should throw away your litter here. No program whatsoever. So we could actually do whatever we liked. So the whole thing actually consists of 19,000 square meters of marble with all these individual pieces, 3 architects, 1 landscape architect and 1 architect working together. These are all the slopes, because it has all these slopes, different slopes, to actually cover the whole roof. And how then, with a white building, how to make that accessible for people that maybe don't see that well. So we had some discussions about to market it yellow, to market it in black, and it did not look well, and we didn't want to do it. So in the end, we actually figured out that we could just say it's art, all the kinks, everything that is steps, that is art, and you don't mark art. So in this piece, you see the art, this is art, this is public plaza. It's actually worked. And the notion of indoor-outdoor was really important for us. That people actually would be curious what's going on inside, and people are starting to go much more to the opera and ballet. And this notion of always being open, 24/7, Norwegian, we love to go hiking, we love to go walking, and then it's always covered, really in the middle of the night, and if it's snow or it's raining, it doesn't matter. And then it's a nice arena for concerts, outdoor concerts, and of course, when it was 10,000 screaming teenager girls because Justin Bieber were there. It was hysterical. As you can see, this is not from that concert. And of course we have winter. So then for the gentle slope that goes straight into the door, everything is easy, but of course you have to go on your own responsibility, and of course people have been skiing down here, and then you actually can go straight into the ocean. And then you can actually meet a real swan, because also the animals that actually are in the ocean, suddenly you actually can walk on land again, because it's just been a really big highway. So there is actually both operas and ballets inside the building, and it's of course lit during night, so you can actually see that there's something going on inside, but I will not talk about that. All the new cityscapes. I mean, we're getting more and more urban, and how do we use the space that we have? We have to think smarter, but some spaces are also caused by really different things. Our office in New York is based on that we got a commission for a Ground Zero project in 2004 at downtown on Manhattan. Then it was already a master plan that was won by Daniel Libeskind, and there was actually also a design for the memorial won by Peter Walker and Michael Arad. And then they had 2 smaller projects that was not the high-rises, that could be then the cultural complex and the theater complex. And totally not what we thought. We actually got the one commission for the cultural complex. We thought it was impossible for a non-American office to actually get a commission at Ground Zero, but they chose us. So what we worked with was actually, again, past, present, and future. You can do that in any project. We use that a lot. So you can just steal that idea, that's fine. And the past is actually the contemplative, the emotional, because it is a big museum, a 9/11 museum below grade, designed by Davis Brotherbone in New York. And then the future is the productive commercial, the 7 new skyscrapers that will be there. And our was the present. It was actually about the culture. Actually, after 1.5 years, we just started an office space in New York. They stopped the whole project. They threw out the users, and they stopped everything program. They said it was too big, and then we had to restart. So from a 30,000 square meter building, we ended up with a 4,200 square meter building, which is actually just the entry going down below grade to the museum. And this section actually made that project, because they didn't really understand that they needed to go down to have an entry point. It's really just a small pavilion in the very beautiful memorial. And the below grade museum is extremely large. You have the 2 pools that is part of the memorial, extremely hard construction site. Just to get one column down there, it was almost impossible. And our little building was really to get people indoors, and it's a lot about security and security and technical issues. We found one of the sacred elements that was part of the former Twin Towers. They are called the tridents. Some of them survived. They're almost like sculptures. And we put them inside the building to show that you could go a bit low grade. And our building, actually our aim was to make an invisible building, and it should be all about reflection. So the facade is really that you can reflect yourself, reflect the site, reflect the memory and the memorial, and not that the building is important itself. So it's really to show more the landscape behind it. The memorial is very, very beautiful. If you are ever in New York, please go there. And it's a sacred place downtown in the middle of the most busiest place in the world. We have been kind of lucky to work with a lot of cultural projects, and that also is then libraries. In University of Ryerson in Toronto, in Canada, they have, you see hardly, let's say Ryerson University. They wanted to make an extension to their existing library, and they were not really rated well at all, Ryerson University. And they were at the beginning of the Yonge Street, which is the longest street in the world or something like that. And they tried to say that, okay, it's a learning center, but it's actually no program. What we then did was actually looking back to the not program part of the roof of and the urban plaza of the opera, and what was the most important thing there? Really, that you didn't have to sit there to study, you didn't need to sit over there to do your computer. So I thought that was really, really important. So actually we created this section that is actually all about a landscape. Okay, there's some retail in the bottom, but to enter at ground was really important to open that up as much as possible. We have a valley, we have a bridge, we have the bluff, we have a garden, we have sunshine, we have beach, we have the forest and the sky. That was actually the programming of the building. And then how to make the beach, actually make a sloping floor that is actually not really having have a couple of real chairs, but not that many. And people are using it really 24/7. The rating of the students has gone up very high. Students are studying much more than they used to do. The grades are getting up, and the university has gone really popular. A learning center without, what you learn in a learning center with no program, that's up to you. And of course, the urban connection to the city is maybe the most important. It's easy to get sucked into the learning center, and it's open for everybody, not just the students. So moving back to New York, going to Times Square and Broadway, the busiest and really annoying place. Too many people, too many cars. And after a long discussion over 20 years, also Cal Architects has been there to test out one-to-one, like they're doing all around the world. They're testing out, and they figure out, yes, they actually wanted to change Broadway to make it pedestrian and take away the cars. So the New Yorker had actually 2 front pages, what they thought the Broadway would be. So we worked, first it was called the Duffy Plaza Extension, and then looking into how much vehicle space it was and how much for the pedestrians. So Broadway, that are a diagonal through the whole of Manhattan, actually was then closed for traffic from 41st Street to 45th, and then 7th Avenue going south, just one direction with cars. So after quite an extensive design, and in the US, you need to have so many public meetings. I think they altogether had 100 meetings for the project, talking to all the different people. The problem, or the real hard way, was actually that we were just supposed to design the floor. And at the shortest depth, it was 75 millimeters. Because we shouldn't do anything with the signs, anything with the buildings, and they said it should be totally flexible. Hopefully no chairs or nothing at all. And we tried in the end to convince them that they actually should have at least loose chairs, and also that they should have some secondary seating that could be used. And it was built in 3 3 long periods. Actually, the last opening was just before Christmas. And I think most people that are there, they don't recognize it at all. I mean, that's also part of being a landscape architect. It's just the flooring, or you can't even see that something has changed. But everybody can see that it's totally changed because you can walk. There's no cars, and it's really spacious. And the flexibility was really important for them, so they could easily turn into yoga day or rodeo day, or much more important, you can actually protest. You can get together and say what's important. So they have been doing a lot of research after the opening in 2009, and they have been testing a lot of things. So maybe the most important, they said, is today 80% of visitors feel that Snøhetta's pedestrian plaza make Times Square a safer, nicer, and more New York place to be. And that's really nice to hear. So a couple of new images, then you easily can see that you can still drive on 7th Avenue, but there's this enormous wide walkway. And you have all of these secondary seatings that people sit close together. They're used in many different ways, and it's actually slowing down the pace a lot. Moving from really the urban context, going into more landscapes. And prototyping, I think, is really important, and actually how we use the tools. And I think the 3D world, where we're not getting out of it, and we should use it more clever. This is a 3D model of the Wild Reindeer Center that was made in the office, and we have we have more workshops, and we even have an industrial robot, so we can mill different kind of materials. And this was a model for the reindeer pavilion, and then it was tested out 1-to-1, and then we could really go into how to actually do the work. This is actually made in the western part of Norway, and it's actually a boat building industry that actually milled the 3D model. And then it was carried on a trailer all the way to the mountain, to the middle of Norway. And then in the frame, there was just a steel frame, and it was put in, it's pine wood, it's 20 by 20, it's no glue, no nails, it's just laid on top of each other. And it has this very sculptural form, and the exterior and the interior is the same. It has a fireplace, it's a shelter, it's for viewing wild reindeer that are very, very rare. And honestly, I've never seen a wild reindeer up there, but I see some musk ox, so they are kind of rare. And the funny thing is that if you are a wild reindeer, you can just stand outside and look into the strange animals that are inside this box, and then have the notion of how it actually is to be on a viewing point, and you see Snøhetta in the back. And the wild reindeer is actually then what's leading us, because most of the time we are actually, of course, we are designing for people, but this was for the wild reindeers. And the wild reindeers, it's extremely strange, but we're told that it's true. If you go to the cave paintings in southern Europe, go to Lascaux, to the caves, they have some wild reindeers in the caves. And they said the last Ice Age, 10,000 years ago, the wild reindeers kept on following the ice. It was melting, following, and ended up in Norway. So that is actually the wild reindeers that used to be in Provence. Come on, why would you do that? Stay in Norway instead. And that actually led us to that we were invited to a competition for the Lascaux new pavilion. And this is the graphic for the project, and we actually won that. And it's a center for ancient art, and it's all about these cave drawings. They are 18,000 years old, which doesn't make sense at all that it's actually possible. And the story in Montagnac, in Lascaux, was actually back in 1942, because in 1942, during the Second World War, there were 4 guys that was out playing with their dog. And it has been a big storm, and the storm had also, some trees had been tripping over, and suddenly the dog just, you can hear the dog, wow, 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 wow. And I went, wow, what happened to the dog? And one of the guys went after it, and I saw a big hole next to the tree, and went in there, and it actually had a torch. And then it was totally dark, and then he lit his torch, and he saw the cave drawings. So it was actually discovered, and then it was locked till after the World War, and then they started to visit the caves. And it's actually, you see the circle, that's where the caves are, and then the site is the other dotted area. And then in 1960s, they understood that, I mean, it was not good at all that people were visiting it, because people were taking it, and it had a totally new temperature, the humidity, everything had been canned for 18,000 years. So they made a replica in 1984, so a lot of people that were there in the 80s, they were sure they saw the original, but it was not. And then that also was closed, and they made a competition to make a new cave and a museum for it. So this is the site and also the section, and maybe you can see it's really tiny. Can you see this down there? That's actually where the caves are, so they're how they are located. So we worked on how to approach a cave museum, which also will have a big replica. We worked with the landscape and said that we make 3 slots in the landscape. And then we said the first one is vertical, which then creates a facade that you can enter, and the 2 others actually are slots into the ground that is horizontally, so you can have light into the caves. And the site itself, it's very green, it's a nice area, and it has a lot of agriculture, and this area just have green grass, and our projects then ended out there with an agriculture patchwork with the plants that is around in the neighborhood. And our vertical slot, the first one, would then represent the caves, how you get in. And this is also a 3D model with a lot of pathways leading into the museum. And of course, then the section again is, most of it is below grade. It's inside the earth, and we want to create these different ways to walk on top of the building and walk all over it. The program was pretty complicated and has all these different rooms, and then maybe you can see this strange thing over here, which is 500 square meters replica redone for the caves exactly how they are today. And it's made in 3 levels, and the caves is actually how you then walk in, and you can see that. Half of the budget of this project is actually exhibition and scenography, and half of it is architecture. So actually to explore the area would be really important, and also the experience, how did a landscape look 18,000 years ago, and try to imagine that. And of course they're telling the story about the dog that actually found the cave drawings. And what they really think and discover is that they think that they had some sort of torches made of animal fat that they actually can burn, that you have some candlelight, and they figure out that it's 2 lux. That's the amount of light you get in there. So when you go in, the 30 people go together, and you go into the cave, and you go down, and it's 2 lux. So you should experience it as it used to be. They think nobody has lived there, but they don't really know why it was used and how it was used. And of course, this experience that you actually can see the cave as we think they did it that long time ago. And so this cave experience is really important. The 3D scanning of the caves is probably the most complicated scanning ever. And they actually even scan the noise, the sound, and the acoustics to get that into the 3D model to make it the same way. The geological layers is very different, so sometimes when there's white stripes, it's easier to paint, and it's really complicated the way they have painted it, all these animals, and it's really using perspective and false perspective, so if you move, you can see an animal that actually is watching you. So they were extremely complicated and well done. Just before Christmas, there was a pre-opening of the President Hollande was there to open the center. We don't really have that fantastic photo yet because they will wait till it get more green till the landscape is finished, which is really good. But you can see here is during the construction process, and then you have this slot, and you have these big exhibitions that also is for artists today, and many artists have been really inspired by the cave drawings. So this is now this little slot that is inside the landscape, and you walk inside the landscape to get to it. Okay, let's move to Sweden. This is University of Lund made a synchrotron. You probably heard about CERN in Switzerland. This is like a little brother that they made in Sweden. And it's really, we were only doing the landscape because it was a competition and they couldn't agree, and they gave the buildings to a Swedish architect and say, maybe you can do the landscape. And we said we can't combine the two projects, but of course we can work on it. The really interesting thing is that this is just outside Lund, central Lund. It's a medieval town, and it's expanding into a science city. It's it's the food chamber of Sweden. It has all these wide fields, and also with the wide fields, it's very gentle slope. And what they discover, a synchrotron splits atoms into electrons, and then you use the light for research. Very non-scientific explanation from me. It's a very large area, and they figure out because they're sending the light 250 meters into a linear accelerator, it goes into a 600-meter large circle, and then it's taken out the light. And they figure out if you drive on the highway on one side of the laboratory, when you hit a stone, that will create vibrations in the ground. And if you're going to split atoms into electrons, it has to be totally stable. So no vibrations. They figure out that the vibrations actually were 10 to 40 meter in wavelength inside the ground. And as a landscape architect, traditional landscape architects say cut and fill should be balanced, should go in zero. The water runoff has to be taken care of on the site, and the Swedish municipality was really strict about this. So we got a new technical parameter, how to actually try to reduce the vibrations in the ground. And the researchers said, because it's very gentle sloping, so the more chaos you have in the surface, the less of the vibrations will go down. So that's why we started to work with this, to try to recreate the surface. And we knew we had to dig a lot because of all the things going on below grade. So this is 250 meters for the linear accelerator. And what we did was, we have the site, it's pretty flat, we have the large ring that needs to be protected from vibrations. It's taken out in 20 tangents. So we use the tangents. One set of tangents should make a new wave landscape that will be 10 meter wave line to 40 meter. And then to create even more chaos, we had another set of waves that actually is a spiral. And those two sets of the new waves in the landscape, they created a new pattern. We started in January. In the end of April, they started to dig, and we have to actually use the Rhino model straight into the bulldozer. You can see me really happy in charge of the bulldozer. It's actually much more harder than it looks. And then you can do it you did one cut, and it was filled perfectly the same day and was on site. So when we worked on this was September. This is, now you can see the ring, 2012, and the landscape starting to get really, it's really finished long before the building. And it's a lot of green surfaces, and they said, okay, this is not a golf court, what to have on all these surfaces. So we were looking into how the traditional agricultural landscape used to be. And 100 years ago, most of this was meadowland. 80% of the meadowland in southern Sweden is gone because there's no monoculture to make agriculture. So then 5 kilometers away, we found a meadowland that also was a natural reserve. And we actually could take the hay, cut the hay from there. We got it from the municipality and then put it over our site. And we did that because the landscaper was finished 4 years before the buildings. We had 4 growing seasons, and we're still taking hay from the area around it. And you can see there's a rabbit then jumping around on the exciting new landscape. And the hills are 4.5 meters tall. That made us to go in balance in zero to the cut and fill. Okay. And actually, the CEO on the opening in June said that actually the landscape had reduced the vibration by 30%. So it actually helped a lot for the facility. Some short projects in the end. Attractions. Sometimes we need to do something that is a little bit different. maybe we actually don't have that much budget, but we want to do something. Snøhetta, we're doing a lot of competition. We say we win 2 of 15 entries. It means that we lose a lot. We're losing and losing and losing, and sometimes we're winning, and then we're losing again. This was a competition for the Nordic Embassy Complex in Berlin. That was in 1999. The complex was even, the competition was, I think, in 96. We didn't win that. There was a Finnish-Austrian office that won that. Then we were invited to be one of 5 doing just the Norwegian part of it. And the Norwegian government said, you know, it's just an office building, and we spent all the money on the common building and the common plan, so don't get too excited. It's just an office. And then we figure out, okay, it's an office in 4 floors, but this front is really important, and it's on the plaza. And that is what everybody will see when you get in. And we thought that since when we were working with the library in Alexandria, we worked a lot with the stone in southern Norway because we have a very nice granite. And we're together with Christian Brystad, who is an artist. So we said, if we just take off the layer of vegetation on top, we get this fantastic, beautiful granite, which is glacier-shaped the last 20,000 years, at least from 10,000 years ago. And then we could find one piece that we actually could manage to get as a front of the office building. So it's actually 15 meters tall and 5 meters wide and 70 centimeters thick and weighs 140,000 kilo. And we drill into it, so it's a wire with diamonds that you drill into it, and you have when you slide a cheese with a wire, this is done in the same way. So you just cut the whole thing in one piece, and then of course we have to move it around. And we thought that we could ship it because then go to the rivers in Germany, but that was too hard, so we had to get it on a trailer, and we had to actually strengthen 2 bridges in Germany to get it all the way to Berlin. And then we have the building, and it just gets closer and closer for the surface, and we get this fantastic, beautiful surface that's just made of nature. And in the top floor, the ambassador, he or she stands there and don't have any view at all, looks straight into a mountain, but it actually can tell a wonderful story, a piece of Norway that is brought and is something like an icebreaker. On one of the culture buildings we got the commission is northern part of Norway, and it has a fantastic, beautiful landscape. You see the chain with mountains, they call the 7 Sisters, and in this area the bishop Petter Dass lived from. He lived in 1647 to 1647 to 1707. And in 2007, they want to make a museum. This is very close to the Arctic Circle. And because of the Gulf Stream, you can actually live up there, even if it's really far up north. And it actually even have agriculture. They gave us a site. You can see the original site, and it's an old church from the 12th century, and it's an old farmhouse. We tried to do 2 concept designs, and we thought they were no good. So we said, no, it's not the right site on the agriculture area. We need to look to something different. So we started looking into the landscape, and we could see that there was a dip in the landscape, and we figured out, okay, we started to wire saw mountains, so why not try that again? Because we said the natural landscape, the mountains are the most important, so the agricultural landscape and the cultural landscape with the church, and then you should see the new museum building. So we made a cut in the landscape, and the front of the building should not be bigger than the small farmhouses around it. So the section is long, and you can go through. And this was in the Norwegian Baroque, very much heaven and hell. So we thought it could actually be very dramatic. So we started wire sawing. This is gneiss. So we're making the nice cut. And the leader, Maria, she almost were crying. She said, it's so beautiful. We can't have a museum in there. It should just be the cut in the landscape. I said, I think the client wants their museum. So I think we should just keep on working. So on one side, then you have this cut in the stone. And of course, you could never plan for to get moss. When you have the water coming down, it started to get green, very, very beautiful. And then when you see it from a distance, it's very small in the front, and you have the church, and you have this notion of mirroring. Is it real or is it unreal? Is it mirroring? Is it water? Is it window? And it reflects yourself as well. So on one side, you can go through. On the other side, you can climb a stair. And you have a beautiful view to the cultural landscape. And of course, they also have northern lights. And then on the other side, you actually have this stair. If it goes to heaven or hell, you have to go there to explore. Okay, this is the last project on the show tonight. The 7th room, it was actually opened on Wednesday. So I got very, very new photos. This is all about the forest. This is really far up in northern Sweden. And actually, I was asked to do a lecture in a tiny, tiny place called Pajala. And I figured out that it was on the way to the tree hotel. It was actually 2.5 hour drive extra to get there, but everything is very long distance. They have this beautiful pine forest up north. And then there's a couple, Britta and Kent. They have lived there all their life. And they bought, they had a bed and breakfast, I think, for 5 years, and nobody stopped. So they figured out what to do, how actually, he was a fireman, so he actually made a living of that, but they actually wanted to have a bed and breakfast. And then there was this guy that was making a film of a treehouse. So they built a treehouse, and they made a film, and they really liked the treehouse, and they thought, oh, maybe it could be interesting, maybe people would be interesting to stay in a treehouse where we have this fantastic northern light, and it's very light during the summer. So Kent is he's really a fisherman, so he's always out fishing. And 3 of his friends are actually architects, Swedish architects. So in one of the fishing trips, he said, "Do you think anybody would be interested in actually making a new design for a treehouse?" And all the 3 architects, yes, they wanted to do it. So actually, they made 3 houses in the first year. So it's actually the one that is red is called a blue cone, because they changed their mind. It shouldn't be blue, it should be red. And then it's a cabin, and it's the mirror cube. And the dragonfly is made of Icelandic and a Finnish architect. And then it's the bird's nest and the UFO. So they had 6 of these 3 rooms. Very, very beautiful. And then we were asked, because I was going to Pajala, and I made the way by to see all these fantastic 3 rooms. And then Kent met me and he said, "We have been waiting for Snøhetta." And I said, "What do you mean, have been waiting for Snøhetta?" He said he really wanted us to design the 7th room for them. So in May, we went up and had a concept. So we said, all the other buildings, all the other 3 rooms are 6 to 4 meters above ground. And they're all suspended to the trees. We thought, no, the forest is more important than the tree room. So it should actually stand on its own legs. And the forest should be left alone because it's really beautiful. So we said, we just make a normal cabin, a Nordic cabin, a wooden cabin. And the first idea was actually to just move it up in the tree crowns. And then they needed to have this little house down on the ground. And we wanted it to be a lift. So we actually could go in the lift, the small house, and then go up in the big house, which is still not a big house. We needed to do a reality check because there are fire escape issues. So we needed not just a lift, but also a stair. So then we dropped the whole lift idea. And we then looked into one-to-one, sketched out where actually it should be. So the little treehouse actually is U-shaped and is embracing one tree. And then we have the stair going up. So the plan, you come up the stair, you come in, you see a fireplace, there are 2 bedrooms, and there is a lounge that's facing north to see the northern light, and it's actually also got a shower, which just one of the other buildings have. And the 3D model and the little physical model was used, and we really looked into how we would work with this. It should be a black house that maybe was more or less invisible. And the construction really to be on site. So we bored 12 holes in the ground, 3 to 8 meters down, and then have a little extension over ground. And then it's 12 legs, and it's all constructed on site. just local builders to build the whole thing, and then it was lifted up in the air by 2 cranes. So here's one of the crane lifting up the building up in the tree crowns. It's 30 tons. They asked for 2 bedrooms and a balcony. And we were like, a balcony? No, it's really all about the tree. How can we make that a more exciting experience? So we thought, since we had these 2 bedrooms, that we really were drawing it. First, it was the forest that is important, and then it was from the inside to make it comfortable and to have the view all over, to really be in the tree crowns. And then the area around the tree, we wanted that just to be a net. So it should be a net that you can walk on, so you're really inside the forest and you are part of the forest. So that was the one big thing we wanted to make for the balcony. And then actually we had an underside of the building. And now the 5th facade, the roof is sold last year. So then we're talking about the 6th facade. And the 6th facade, we actually took a picture of the forest before we started building it. And then we made a black and white photo of it. And we printed it on aluminum sheets and then attached it on the underside of the building. So when you're getting closer, when you're all the way underneath it, the whole building disappears, and you just see the memory of the forest, how it used to be without a building on top of it. The rooms are very, it's all about seeing the forest and being part of being in the forest. You're 10 meters above ground, and you have skylights in the room, and you go in one level, and then it's 30 centimeters up. So also the beds are inside the 30 centimeters. So you really feel that you're inside the forest. And the 2 bedrooms, and you can see the net in between. And for the project, all the other projects, Atelier Lyktan, which is a lamp producer, a Swedish, from actually in the 1930s, they have been making prototypes for new light fixture for all the tree rooms. So we were teaming up with them. And since our building should be black and very Nordic blonde on the inside, so we had actually a pine wood for planks that was burned like a traditional Japanese technique, and then you don't need to have any maintenance afterwards. It's hard to do maintenance up 10 meters in the air. So it's black on the outside, and then it's very Nordic blonde in the inside, and we did the same for the light fixtures. So we wanted to be as much about the natural light as possible. When you need electric light, now it's really dark up there, it should be totally flexible. So it's actually 2 sheets of birch veneer with a piano hinge, and then you can do it 180 degrees up and open it up. So it's both for a bedroom light and also a suspended light. I can see here the suspended light, and you can turn around. So it's about the same thing, the black and the white. And it's also ashwood flooring and birch on the walls. So the whole thing then has this structure. You go up 10 meters. We make a journey because you're turning 90 degrees and 90 degrees to get up. You get closer to the 6th facade, to the existing forest like it used to be. And when you lie down, you can actually find exactly the same position. So you see the trees going into the mirroring of the 6th facade. So this just opened on Wednesday, and we had the first now to stay overnight in the cabin. And actually the net can take 900 kilos. So we were at least 6 people at the same time on the net. It's really all about people. Snøhetta consists of this fantastic bunch of people that is only girls and boys like to have fun together to create new projects. And I think the way that we are every year going up to Tverrfjellhytta, to the Wild Reindeer Center, and having fun, working together and actually exchanging ideas and being generous, it's really important for us. And we have such a big responsibility because we need to be in charge to how things will look after us. And I think as architects, landscape architects, planners, we need to be responsible to think much longer and keep on moving mountains and keep on climbing mountains and keep on having fun. So this is our office in Oslo. We have the ship going straight to Denmark and Germany every day. So it's good to have a connection to the international realm. And Snøhetta, we are a mountain where most of it, we are people that really want to move the world with architecture. Thank you.